Hi everybody, this is Sara Fancy and I am going to present my book, Learn Tabletop Constellations. So I'm just going to bring the book up. Oh, here we go. Okay, so I wrote this book, actually I think it was about 2 years ago or a year and a half ago, and it's basically a tutorial which goes with the classes that I teach. So I teach a course called Learn Table Top Constellations, and this is kind of like the manual to go with it. So I'm just going to show you what's inside, and here we go. I don't know why it's doing. Okay. So that's the cover. So on the cover is this horse that represents numerous things. This horse kept coming up in different constellations. So it's obviously it's a war horse which has a coat of arms on it. In tabletop, you can use all kinds of things. You can use objects that are in your environment, or you can use, so in this case, I'm using toy horses, like the kids' toy horse models. And some of my students use farm animals, they use gemstones, soft toys. Some people use marbles. So anyway, this made it to the cover. So then we go into the contents. And these are the chapters. I'm going to go to the next. There we go. Okay. Okay, so what is a tabletop constellation? A tabletop constellation is constellation therapy on any stable, flat surface. The term originated from a German man named Bert Hellinger, who introduced family constellation therapy to the West in the early 90s. Variations evolved from his work, some of which include artist, business, horses, nature, organizational, systemic, family, and tabletop constellations. Here you will learn how to do simple, organizational tabletop constellations. So then there's a bit about me. I'm going to skip that unless you want to read it. It just kind of talks about how I got into it. And yeah, I've been into it since 2002. That was when I was first introduced to family constellations. It wasn't a tabletop, it was a group family constellation circle in Los Angeles. And then it talks about my background in healing arts, which is polarity therapy. I don't know if you know what that is, but it's essentially a body work that includes all different kinds of therapies, and then cranial or sacral unwinding. Anyway, and then I was drawn into the constellation work, and in 2008, I learned how to do it with Francesca Mason Boring, and then I graduated and I did it with my horses, and it went really well. And that's what I do here at my place in Ranchita in California. I offer horse constellations. So the tabletop constellations are really good because you can do them anywhere. You can do them online. You can do them in the park. You could do it in a restaurant or a cafe. I've done it on a train to Tokyo. I did 2. They're really powerful. Okay, so I'm going to go to this chapter, the tabletop constellation setup. I'm just going to see if I can do this highlight spotlight with my, oh, here we go. Tabletop constellation setup. Tabletop constellations are remarkable because you can use anything as representations as long as the objects fit comfortably onto the tabletop and they are approximately the same size. During my tabletop constellation class, I encourage students to put together a collection of objects which I refer to as a kit. It's important they choose objects with which they feel a connection. I've seen students use cats, dogs, dragons, farm animals, gemstones, and even extraterrestrials. When I'm working with a client on Zoom, I ask them to choose objects in their environment to use as representatives. Objects can include candles, gems, paper clips, pens, sacred objects, souvenirs, stones, anything works. It is important the person chooses and places their own representatives so that they have agency in all of their actions during the constellation. So what that means is I don't pick the objects, I don't place them. The person I'm working with does that. And it's much more, this word, like, there's no question that they're not being manipulated. Like, I'm not manipulating the session because they're choosing, they're placing, I'm just reflecting. And then we start with an intention. A session always begins with an intention. Without intention, the tabletop has no containment and will necessarily stray and become too abstract to be of therapeutic use. Examples of intentions. I want to find meaning in my life. I want to quit my job but feel financially obligated to stay. I want to start my own business. I want to have a family. I want to leave my relationship. I want to heal from this illness. You get the idea. As an example, let's take a look at the first intention. So we're going to go up here. Okay. I want to find meaning in my life. So I begin by inviting the person to choose an object in their environment to represent themselves and place it on the surface of choice, free of any clutter. So that's important. We don't want other things on the tabletop. It has to use a plain, neutral colored covering on a table or other surface on which objects will be placed. It's important to be able to see the objects clearly, especially when conducting tabletop constellation therapy online. Yeah, you have to be able to see the objects. So then you can reflect on them. Choose a fabric that will provide good contrast. You shouldn't use a patterned covering because it will tend to be distractive. Once the person has placed themselves, ask them to choose and place an object for meaning. Now there are two objects on the table. Notice the position of themselves. Is it in the center or on the periphery? Does meaning and themselves relate to each other in any way? So basically, we're looking at the placement. We're looking at how they relate. Let's go. So basically, goes into detail about that. I'm not going to read the whole thing. Then I talk about this personal constellation that I did, and it's a video. If you click on this, it goes to the video of the constellation. It's only a couple of minutes. And then I write about my reflections after, because I just basically did it quickly as a demonstration, but then after, when I looked at it, it was a conversation and it had meaning for me. I'm not going to go into it. If you want to find out more about it, it's a bit controversial. Might be a bit much for this video. But if you're interested, it's in the book. I'm going to skip that. So, how tabletop constellations work. Tabletop constellations can be compared to sand tray therapy, in which small objects are used as representations for oneself, people, feelings, etc., and are placed inside the sandbox. So they're a little different, but there's a similarity. Tabletop constellations differ from sand tray therapy because we include Hellinger's family constellation therapy as a foundational way in which to work. Here are 3 of Hellinger's principles we use in constellations. So this is pretty important. Everybody has a place, inclusion, order of love, and accepting what is. And then I talk about hidden loyalties. This is getting more into Hellinger's work. In the course, we don't go so deep into Hellinger's work. That's more in the 8-month class that I teach, where we really go into the principles of family constellation work. And then it's possible to do soul retrieval work in a tabletop. Let's see what else. Oh yeah, when you're facilitating, you want to be neutral. So I just read that bit because that's quite important. When facilitating a tabletop constellation, it is best for us to maintain a neutral approach. It's okay if we don't understand the person's relationship to their constellation. We don't need to force it to make sense. In terms of culture, gender, politics, and race, your personal opinions need to stay out of it. This will ensure your work is clean. You want to be clean. You don't want to project any of your stuff onto it. If we manipulate a session in order to suit our version of a happy ending, or the ending that we think that they should have, we are actually doing a disservice to our client. Assuming we know what is right for them is wrong. What is right for them, if we think we know what's right for them, is wrong. Obviously, we want the best for people. We don't want them to suffer and die prematurely. The best healing we can offer, though, is when we hold space for what is and look for the truths in the constellation which support the client without us being egocentrically invested in the outcome. So then I give an example of this constellation as a case study for that. I'm not going to read it. You can read it if you want to, if you get the book. But it's beautiful. It's sad. It makes me feel sad when I read it. That's why I don't really want to read it. But the invisible becomes visible. Okay, I'm going to skip that one. Tokyo to Sendai constellation train ride. So this is what I was talking about when I did the constellation on the train. There's a picture there. It was on a fold out thing. It's quite detailed. I'm going to skip that one. Center of my world. This is another case study. Feelings. So in this work, like I'm always asking, like, if you want to ask people, how do you feel? What do you notice? You know, get them connected to their sensations. It's somatic work. And for some people, it's very difficult to connect to their feelings. so I talk about culture, you know, like I'm from England originally, and we're kind of told not to show our feelings, to just like suck it up, you know. So then when you come into this kind of work, it can be difficult to tap into that. I mean, I basically had to relearn how to express myself. But, you know, we can do that. Okay, let's see. So then one of my students came to me in 2015 called Richard, and he was a physicist and was moving out of that world in order to move into the healing arts. And he stayed with me at my place. It wasn't here, it was near here. And we did a tabletop constellation, and it made a huge impression on him. And he wrote this blog about it, and he calls it the Fear Constellation. And these are pictures I took back then of his constellation. I thought it's such a great blog and description of it that I asked him if I could include it in the book, and he said yes. So his name is Richard Griffin. He's also a facilitator of constellation work. And here we go. More pictures. And then here I think this is the end, is it? Yeah. So, conclusion. Tabletop constellations offer a singular way of experiencing relationships. Sometimes in a constellation, the roles can flip, with the protagonist realizing they are in fact the antagonist, and the victim is instead revealed to be the perpetrator. The ultimate purpose of constellations is to learn to become part of the third mind, which doesn't take sides. Truth, the silent, too often unnoticed entity in everyday life, is the only truly objective observer and is always present in a constellation. Though one might finish a session without all issues resolved, if sincerely desirous of an outcome that is good for all parties concerned and willing to lay aside ego, the constellation will continue to unfold as time passes. Constellation therapy becomes a catalyst for change, yet paradoxically also is a path to discover one's immanence, one's unchanging, intrinsic and innate attributes. These are the ultimate goals of constellation therapy. So there you have it. I'm going to go back to the beginning. So this is in the PDF book. It's on my website, silverhorseretreat.com. And the class starts on Saturday, this Saturday, the 22nd of July. It's a 5-week class, once a week on Saturday mornings, 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time to 11:30. And I'm going to leave the details in the description. If you're interested, I'd love to have you in the class. They're also recorded, so if you miss it, you can catch up with the recording. And this class sort of segues into the 8-month class, which I talked about, which is every Sunday, twice a month. It's every other Sunday, and it starts August the 27th. If anyone's interested in that, I'll leave the link in the description. Yeah, so I think that's it. So thank you for watching, and if you have any questions, please put them in the comments, or any comments, please put them in the comments. And if you liked it, like it, and if you didn't, it's okay. I'll do better next time. Thank you for watching. Okay, bye.